My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 35 years old, born in Ohio, raised in a tiny American town where everybody smiled at church on Sundays and whispered about each other on Mondays. People used to call me sweet, cute, harmless. The kind of woman who apologized when someone else bumped into her at the grocery store. Ha ha ha. God, if they only knew. If they knew what was buried underneath my old house. If they knew why I still wake up at 3:17 every single night with tears already running down my face before my eyes even open. I never planned to tell this story. I tried carrying it alone. For 7 years. 7 long years of pretending I was normal while my soul rotted quietly inside me. But guilt is funny. It doesn't scream at first. It whispers. Then it hums. Then suddenly one day you're standing in your kitchen holding a knife to cut strawberries and your hands start shaking because the color red reminds you of blood. And then you realize. You never escaped that night. Not really. It started in November. Cold. Rain hitting the windows so hard it sounded like fingers tapping the glass. I remember standing in my kitchen making boxed macaroni because I was too broke to afford anything else. My husband Daniel was upstairs asleep after another 12-hour shift at the factory. Daniel was a good man. Too good for me. He used to kiss my forehead every morning before work and whisper, "Love you, Claire Bear." Claire Bear. Oh God. Nobody's called me that in years. I still hear it sometimes when the house gets quiet. That night the power flickered twice. Then darkness swallowed everything. I laughed nervously to myself because I've always been terrified of the dark. Even as a grown woman. Stupid, right? Ha ha ha, relax, Claire, I whispered. But my voice sounded tiny. Weak. The rain got louder. I grabbed my phone flashlight and walked toward the basement door because the breaker box was downstairs. And that's when I heard it. A sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just. A thud. Slow. Heavy. Like something accidentally bumping into wood. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. Daniel. I called. No answer. Another thud. My stomach tightened so hard I thought I'd throw up. Now listen. Old houses make noises. Pipes creak. Wood shifts. I knew that. But deep down something inside me already knew that sound was wrong. I opened the basement door. The smell hit first. Wet dirt. Rust. Something rotten underneath it. I covered my nose and aimed the flashlight down the stairs. Nothing. Just darkness. I should have walked away. I should have gone upstairs. I should have woken my husband. But curiosity is dangerous. That's something nobody tells you. Curiosity ruins lives more than hatred ever does. I walked downstairs slowly. Step. 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 The basement floor creaked beneath my socks. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Then I saw it. Mud. Fresh mud across the basement floor. Trailing toward the far corner. I frowned. We never used the basement except for storage. There shouldn't have been mud. I followed the trail. And my chest suddenly became tight. There was a shovel leaning against the wall. Covered in dirt. Fresh dirt. My heartbeat exploded. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" Then my flashlight landed on the ground. And I saw disturbed earth. Like someone had dug into the basement floor. Recently. My knees nearly gave out. I actually laughed for a second from pure fear. That weird terrified laugh people do when their brain can't process reality. Ha ha ha. Daniel, this isn't funny. No answer. Only rain above me. I stepped closer. The dirt looked uneven. Messy. Like someone had buried something in a hurry. My hands went numb. Every instinct screamed at me to run upstairs. But instead, I grabbed the shovel. I don't know why. Maybe because humans are broken creatures. Maybe because some part of me already needed to know. I dug once. Then twice. Then again. The metal hit something soft. My entire body froze. I dropped the shovel immediately. No. No no no. I backed away shaking my head. I told myself it was an animal. A deer maybe. Something stupid. Please God, let it be stupid. But then, I saw fingers. Human fingers. Pale. Covered in dirt. My scream got trapped in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared. Daniel rushed toward me. Claire. I screamed. I screamed so loud my throat burned. Don't touch me. He stopped immediately. And then, God help me. He started crying too. My husband dropped to his knees beside that grave and sobbed like a child. I was scared, he kept saying. I was scared. And somehow, that made everything worse. Because monsters aren't supposed to cry. Monsters aren't supposed to look broken. But Daniel did. The rain pounded harder above us. The dead woman stared upward with those half-open eyes. And somewhere deep inside me, something began to crack. Daniel wiped his face and looked at me desperately. We can fix this. Fix this. Ha ha ha. Can you imagine? A dead body in our basement and he said we could fix it. I should have run to the police. That's what a good person would have done. That's what innocent Claire Bennett should have done. But fear changes people. Fear crawls inside your chest and starts speaking for you. I thought about prison. I thought about losing everything. I thought about reporters. My mother seeing my face on television. And then Daniel whispered the sentence that destroyed whatever goodness I had left inside me. If you call the police, they'll think you helped. Silence. Cold silence. My tears slowed. Because I realized he was right. My fingerprints were on the shovel. I had dug the grave open. I was already part of it. Whether I wanted to be or not. I sank onto the basement floor shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Daniel moved closer carefully like approaching a wounded animal. Then he held my face gently. And whispered. Please, Claire Bear. I broke. I wish I could tell you I stayed strong. I wish I could tell you I chose morality. But I didn't. I was weak. Terrified. Human. And that night, I helped my husband bury her again. We worked for hours in silence. Dirt. Sweat. Tears. Every shovel full felt like another piece of my soul disappearing forever. At one point I started sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Daniel wrapped his arms around me while we sat beside the grave we'd just covered. And unbelievably, I held him back. Two horrible people comforting each other beside a corpse. That's the truth. That's the ugly, disgusting truth. Around 4 a.m. we finished. The basement floor looked normal again. Almost. Daniel kissed my forehead softly. I flinched. He noticed. His face collapsed. Oh God. I still remember how broken he looked. Like he knew he'd already lost me forever. We'll be okay, he whispered. But deep inside, I already knew we wouldn't be. Because the moment you bury a secret with someone, your love starts rotting beside it. The next morning I woke up with dirt still underneath my fingernails. For a few seconds I forgot everything. Sunlight spilled through the curtains. Birds chirped outside. Daniel slept beside me quietly. Normal. Everything looked normal. Then I smelled the dirt. Wet earth. Rot. And suddenly the memory slammed into me so hard I sat upright gasping for air. The body. The basement. Her face. Oh God. Her eyes. I stumbled out of bed and locked myself in the bathroom. Then I threw up again. I cried so hard my chest hurt. You know what's strange? After something horrible happens, the world doesn't stop. The neighbors still walk their dogs. Coffee still brews. Bills still arrive in the mail. Meanwhile your entire soul is screaming. I stared at myself in the mirror for nearly 10 minutes. Mascara stains. Swollen eyes. Messy blonde hair. I looked like a woman who had aged 10 years overnight. And maybe I had. Daniel knocked softly on the bathroom door. Claire Bear. I didn't answer. Please talk to me. Still nothing. Then quietly, I made pancakes. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. Absolutely insane. Ha ha ha, pancakes. My voice cracked halfway through the laugh. A murderer downstairs and pancakes upstairs. I opened the door slowly. Daniel stood there holding a plate. God, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Hands trembling slightly. He wasn't some monster from a movie. He looked like a tired husband trying desperately to save his marriage. And somehow that terrified me more. I whispered, "Who was she?" He looked away immediately. "That doesn't matter. It matters to me." Silence. Then he sighed heavily. "Her name was Rachel." Rachel. Just hearing her name made my stomach tighten. A real person. Not just a body. Not just dirt and blood. She had a name. Daniel rubbed his face slowly. "She worked with me for a few months." I stared at him. My chest already knew the answer before my brain accepted it. "You slept with her." He closed his eyes. And that silence told me everything. I slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the hallway. "Oh my God," I whispered immediately after. "Oh my God." But Daniel didn't react. Didn't yell. Didn't defend himself. He just stood there looking shattered. And suddenly I hated him for making me feel sorry for him. "You cheated on me," I cried. "It was a mistake. A mistake." I screamed. "For how long?" 3 months. 3 months. 3 months while he kissed my forehead every morning. 3 months while I folded his laundry. 3 months while we laughed together on the couch watching stupid cooking shows. I started laughing again. That horrible broken laugh. Ha ha ha, wow. Daniel tried touching my arm. I jerked away instantly. "She got pregnant," he whispered. Everything inside me stopped. "What?" His voice shook violently now. "She said it was mine." I couldn't breathe. No. No, no, no. I had spent 6 years trying to get pregnant. 6 years of negative tests. 6 years of crying quietly in bathrooms. And meanwhile, another woman got pregnant by my husband. My knees nearly buckled. Daniel caught me before I hit the floor. I screamed at him again. "Don't touch me." He backed away immediately. Tears filled his eyes. "She wanted money," he whispered. "She threatened to tell you everything." I stared at him in disbelief. "So you killed her?" "No," he shouted suddenly. The force in his voice made me jump. He immediately looked horrified at himself. Then quieter. "No, no. I didn't mean to." I wrapped my arms around myself tightly. "Tell me the truth." And finally, he did. Or at least I think he did. According to Daniel, Rachel came to our house during a storm while I was away visiting my mother. She demanded money. Threatened lawyers. Threatened divorce. Threatened to expose everything. Daniel said they argued in the basement because he didn't want the neighbors hearing them scream. Then Rachel shoved him. He shoved back. She fell. Hit her head against a metal shelf. And never got up again. Accident. That's what he called it. An accident. I wanted to believe him so badly. Because the alternative was unbearable. But one thought kept clawing at my brain. Why bury her? Why not call the police? Why hide everything? Daniel looked at me like he could hear my thoughts. I panicked. Panic. Such a tiny word for something so evil. I sank onto the couch shaking. And suddenly the house felt different. Every wall seemed darker. Every creak sounded sinister. Underneath us. Beneath our feet. A dead woman lay buried. I looked at the floorboards and almost started crying again. Daniel sat across from me quietly. "We can still survive this." I stared at him in disbelief. Survive? His voice cracked. "I love you, Claire." I burst into tears instantly. Because part of me still loved him too. That's the sickest part of all this. Love doesn't die cleanly. Even after betrayal. Even after horror. Love hangs around like cigarette smoke in old curtains. I hated him. But I also remembered our first date. The way he danced terribly in the kitchen. The way he held my hand during my father's funeral. Human hearts are disgusting that way. They can carry love and hatred together until both start poisoning each other. The days after the burial became a blur. I stopped sleeping. Every tiny sound made me jump. At night I'd stare at the bedroom ceiling imagining Rachel beneath the house. Cold. Alone. Forgotten. Sometimes I swore I could hear faint noises downstairs. Tiny scratches. Soft thumps. I knew it was impossible. Dead people don't move. But guilt makes your imagination cruel. One night around 2 a.m. I woke up suddenly. The house was silent except for rain tapping against the windows. Daniel slept beside me. Then I heard it. A creak. Downstairs. I froze instantly. Another creak. Slow. Heavy. My heart began pounding violently. I nudged Daniel awake. Did you hear that? He opened his eyes sleepily. Hear what? The creak came again. From below us. The basement. Daniel sat up immediately now. We stared at each other silently. Then. Thud. Not loud. But unmistakable. My entire body went ice cold. Daniel grabbed the baseball bat beside the bed. I whispered, "Oh God." He walked toward the bedroom door slowly. I followed behind him because I was too terrified to stay alone. The hallway felt freezing cold. Every floorboard groaned beneath our feet. Then we heard it again. Thud. Directly below us. I grabbed Daniel's shirt so tightly my knuckles hurt. Neither of us spoke. Because somewhere deep inside both of us were thinking the exact same thing. Rachel. Daniel walked downstairs carefully. The basement door stood slightly open. I swear to God. I swear on everything holy. We left it closed. My breathing became shaky and uneven. Daniel pushed the door wider. Darkness waited below. And then. A horrible smell drifted upward. Sweet. Rotten. Wrong. I covered my mouth instantly. Oh God. Daniel's face lost all color. The smell of death. We both knew it immediately. Something was happening downstairs. Something bad. Daniel gripped the bat harder. Then slowly. We descended into the basement again. The light flickered weakly overhead. And that's when I saw it. The dirt. Disturbed again. Fresh cracks across the basement floor. I started crying immediately. No, 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 no. Daniel whispered, "That's impossible." Then the overhead bulb swung slightly. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like someone had brushed against it moments earlier. And suddenly, from the darkness behind us, a female voice whispered softly, "Daniel." I stopped breathing. Every muscle in my body locked. That voice. Soft. Female. Right behind us. Daniel. The basement suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. Daniel spun around instantly with the baseball bat raised. Who's there? Nothing. Only darkness. The hanging bulb kept swaying slowly overhead. Back. Forth. Back. Forth. I grabbed Daniel's arm so tightly he winced. My nails dug into his skin. Did you hear that? I whispered. His face looked pale gray now. Yes. One word. Barely audible. The smell downstairs had gotten worse. Rotting sweetness. Wet dirt. Something metallic underneath it. Blood. I started trembling violently. We need to leave, I whispered. Right now. Daniel didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the darkness behind the furnace. Then. Drip. 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 A sound echoed softly through the basement. Liquid hitting concrete. Daniel aimed the flashlight toward the noise. And my stomach nearly turned inside out. Mud. Fresh wet mud trailed across the floor. Like someone had walked barefoot through the basement. I felt tears instantly burn my eyes again. No. The footprints stopped near the wall. Near the buried grave. Daniel stepped closer slowly. The bat shook in his hands now. And suddenly. BZZZZT. The basement light exploded. Darkness swallowed us whole. I screamed. Daniel cursed loudly. Then somewhere inside that darkness, I heard breathing. Not ours. Slow. Wet. Right beside me. I panicked instantly and grabbed blindly for Daniel. Ha ha ha, oh God, Daniel. Claire, he shouted. Then the flashlight clicked back on. The beam jerked wildly across the basement. Shelves. Boxes. Dirt. Nothing else. But something had changed. The basement door upstairs was now fully open. I stared at it. I know it had been half open before. I know it. Daniel looked terrified now too. The kind of terrified you can't fake. His mouth hung slightly open. "Someone's in the house," he whispered. That possibility somehow felt even worse than ghosts. We searched the entire house together. Kitchen. Living room. Bathroom. Closets. Nothing. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. No footprints upstairs. Nothing. But when we returned to the basement stairs, the smell hit again. Stronger. Much stronger. I started gagging immediately. Daniel covered his nose. Oh Jesus. We walked downstairs slowly. And that's when I saw it. The dirt mound had collapsed inward slightly, like something underneath had shifted. I burst into tears. Daniel whispered, "No." Then suddenly, ring ring ring. The phone upstairs exploded through the silence. I screamed again so hard my throat burned. Daniel nearly dropped the flashlight. The house phone kept ringing. Over. And over. And over. We stared at each other. Nobody called that late. Nobody. Finally Daniel walked upstairs slowly and answered it. I stayed frozen at the basement stairs listening. Hello. Silence. Then Daniel's face changed completely. All the blood drained from it. Who is this? A pause. Then quietly. How did you get this number? My chest tightened instantly. Daniel looked toward me slowly, terrified. Then he whispered into the phone. What do you want? Silence again. Then, click. The line died. I ran upstairs immediately. Who was it? Daniel swallowed hard. A woman. Cold rushed through my body. What did she say? His eyes looked haunted. She said, "I know what you buried." I started sobbing instantly. Oh my God, oh my God. Daniel slammed the phone onto the counter. This is impossible. But it wasn't impossible. Someone knew. Somehow. The next few days became hell. Pure hell. Every passing car made me panic. Every knock at the door made my heart stop. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I lost nearly 8 pounds in 1 week. Daniel barely spoke anymore. He walked around like a ghost inside our house. One afternoon I found him sitting alone at the kitchen table staring into nothing. There was a gun beside him. I froze instantly. Daniel. He looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot. I can't do this anymore. Fear exploded inside me. I rushed toward him immediately. Stop. She keeps calling, he whispered. My stomach dropped. What? He nodded weakly. She knows everything. I sat beside him shaking. What does she want? She won't say. He looked completely broken now. Like a man collapsing from the inside. And for one horrible moment, I actually pitied him again. Oh God. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just hate him properly? Then Daniel whispered something that made my blood freeze solid. I think Rachel told someone about us before she died. Us. Again that word. Us. Like I was tied to him forever now. I buried the body too. I helped. No matter how much I cried or regretted it. I helped. That night another storm rolled over town. Thunder rattled the windows. Rain hammered the roof. I sat curled on the couch unable to stop staring at the basement door. Daniel drank whiskey silently beside me. Then suddenly. Knock knock knock. 3 loud knocks at the front door. We both jumped violently. I checked the clock. 11:48 p.m. Who knocks that late? Daniel stood slowly. The whiskey glass trembled in his hand. Knock knock knock. Louder this time. I whispered, "Don't open it." But Daniel walked toward the door anyway. He peeked through the window beside it. Then frowned. There's nobody there. My heart pounded harder. Daniel. Slowly he opened the front door. Cold rain blew inside immediately. The porch was empty. No person. No car. Nothing. Then Daniel looked downward. and suddenly staggered backward. I rushed over and screamed. A small cardboard box sat on the porch, covered in mud. Rainwater dripped from its sides. Daniel bent slowly and picked it up. There was a note taped to the top. "For Claire." My hands went numb. "Don't open it," I whispered. But he already had. Inside the box was a blonde pregnancy ultrasound photo. Rachel's. And underneath it lay a tiny pair of baby socks covered in dirt. I dropped to my knees, crying instantly. Daniel looked like he might faint. Then we saw the final thing inside the box. A photograph. Our basement. Taken from outside the window. Someone had been watching us. At the bottom of the photo, written in black marker, were 5 words. "She didn't die alone." I felt the world tilt sideways. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Daniel looked absolutely horrified now. Because deep inside, he already knew. And suddenly I remembered something terrible. Rachel had looked pregnant. But we only buried one body. We only buried one body. That thought kept repeating in my head like a broken song. Again. 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 Rachel had been pregnant. Far enough along to have an ultrasound. Far enough along for tiny baby socks. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped the photograph onto the kitchen floor. Daniel looked sick. Actually sick. Like he might collapse. "No," he whispered weakly. "No." I stared at him. "You told me she fell." "She did." "You told me it was an accident." "It was." His voice cracked so hard on the last word it almost sounded painful. Thunder shook the house. Rain slammed against the windows. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. If someone took that basement photo, then someone had been near the house after the burial. Maybe during it. Watching us. Watching me cry beside that grave. Oh God. I wrapped my arms around myself tightly. "We need to call the police." Daniel's face snapped toward me instantly. "And say what?" "That someone's threatening us. And when they ask why?" Silence. Horrible silence. Because we both knew the answer. I started crying again. I hated crying so much by then. It felt endless. Like my body had become a leaking faucet I couldn't shut off anymore. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. Then suddenly he whispered, "There's something I didn't tell you." My stomach dropped immediately. "What now?" His eyes wouldn't meet mine. That night, when Rachel came over, he stopped talking. Daniel. She wasn't alone. The room spun. I grabbed the kitchen counter for balance. What? There was a man waiting outside in a car. Every nerve in my body tightened. What man? I don't know. You never saw his face. No. I stared at him in disbelief. You buried a woman in our basement and didn't think to mention another person? He never came inside. How do you know? Because Rachel came down alone. I laughed again. That horrible cracked laugh. Ha ha ha, oh my God. Daniel slammed his fist against the counter suddenly. I was panicking. The sound made me jump. He immediately looked ashamed. God. We were both falling apart. The storm outside got louder. Wind rattled the windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. Then, thump. From upstairs. We froze instantly. Another thump. Heavy. Directly above us. I whispered, "Please tell me that was the pipes." Daniel grabbed the kitchen knife immediately. We stood there silently listening. Thump. Slow footsteps. My entire body went cold. Someone was upstairs. Daniel moved toward the staircase carefully. I followed because I couldn't bear being alone. Every step upward felt wrong. Dangerous. The hallway upstairs was dark except for flashes of lightning through the windows. Daniel whispered, "Stay behind me." Then we heard it again. Creak. From the bedroom. My breathing became shaky and uneven. Daniel pushed the bedroom door open fast. Nothing. The room was empty. But the window was open. Rain blew through the curtains wildly. Daniel cursed under his breath. He rushed to the window. Outside. A figure stood across the street. watching the house. Lightning flashed. For half a second I saw them clearly. A woman. Long dark coat. Standing perfectly still in the rain. Then darkness swallowed her again. I gasped. Daniel. But by the next lightning flash, she was gone. We searched outside anyway like idiots. Barefoot in the freezing rain. Nobody. Nothing. Just wet streets and distant thunder. When we finally returned inside, soaked and shivering, Daniel locked every door in the house. Then every window. Then the basement door. He actually pushed a chair against it afterward. Like that would stop whatever nightmare we were trapped in. I sat curled on the couch hugging my knees. Daniel paced endlessly, back and forth, back and forth. Finally I whispered, "Did you love her?" He stopped walking immediately. The silence hurt more than the answer. "I loved you," he said quietly. "That's not what I asked." He looked exhausted. Broken. "No," he whispered. "I didn't love her." I wiped tears from my face angrily. "Then why?" He laughed softly. But it sounded miserable. "She made me feel like I wasn't failing." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Failing. Because we couldn't have children. Because our marriage had quietly become doctor visits and disappointment and forced smiles. I looked away. And suddenly I hated myself too. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. Sometimes you start blaming yourself for another person's sin. Daniel sat beside me carefully. "We used to laugh more," he whispered. I burst into tears instantly. Because he was right. Once upon a time we danced in the kitchen. Once upon a time we stayed up until 2 a.m. eating cheap pizza and talking about baby names. Once upon a time I thought love alone could protect people. Ha ha ha. What a stupid girl I used to be. Then suddenly, bang. Something slammed against the basement door downstairs. We both jumped violently. Another bang. Harder. The chair scraped loudly across the floor. I screamed. Daniel grabbed the knife again. Bang. The basement door shook. "Oh my God," I cried. Daniel slowly approached the stairs. "Stay here." "No." But he was already moving. I followed anyway. Because fear had become stronger than common sense by then. The chair had tipped over. The basement door stood slightly open again. Cold air drifted upward from below. And underneath it, that smell. Death. Sweet and rotten. Daniel pushed the door open carefully. The basement light flickered weakly. And then we saw it. The dirt mound had collapsed completely. The grave was open. I started sobbing immediately. "No, no, no, no." Daniel rushed downstairs. The flashlight beam shook violently across the floor. And there, half exposed through the dirt, was Rachel's arm. Pale. Rotting. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what lay beside her. Tiny bones. Small enough to fit inside 2 hands. I screamed so hard my throat tore. Daniel staggered backward, looking horrified beyond words. "Oh God." The flashlight slipped from his fingers. It rolled sideways across the basement floor. And in that spinning light, we saw someone standing in the corner. A woman. Tall. Motionless. Watching us. Mud dripped from the bottom of her dress. Her long wet hair covered most of her face. But I could still see her smile. Wide. Wrong. And softly. Almost lovingly. She whispered. "You buried my sister." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. That woman stood in the basement corner smiling at us while rainwater dripped from her dress onto the concrete floor. Drip. 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 Daniel stepped in front of me instantly. "Who are you?" he shouted. But his voice shook badly. The woman tilted her head slowly, and when she finally moved forward into the flickering light, my stomach dropped. She looked so much like Rachel. Same blonde hair. Same sharp cheekbones. Same pale eyes. Only colder. Harder. Like life had carved cruelty into her face. "You know who I am," she whispered. Daniel's face lost all color. "Oh God." She smiled wider at that. "Ha ha ha, there he is," she said softly. "The scared little husband." I grabbed Daniel's arm. Daniel. But he couldn't stop staring at her. The woman stepped closer to the open grave. Her eyes drifted down to Rachel's exposed body. For a moment her smile disappeared completely. And suddenly she looked heartbroken. Oh God. I'll never forget that expression. She knelt beside the grave carefully and brushed dirt from Rachel's hair with trembling fingers. You left her down here alone, she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. Then she looked at the tiny bones beside Rachel. And something inside her seemed to snap. When she looked back up at us again, her face had changed. Pure hatred. You killed both of them. Daniel shook his head violently. No. No, that's not what happened. She stood slowly. Then tell me. Silence. Daniel couldn't speak. The woman laughed softly. But it wasn't normal laughter. It sounded damaged. Like a person who had cried too much for too many years. Ha ha ha, yeah, she whispered. That's what I thought. I finally found my voice. We didn't mean. Her eyes snapped toward me instantly. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. She hated me more. Not Daniel. Me. You helped bury her, she whispered. My throat closed. Tears rolled down my face immediately. I was scared. She stepped toward me slowly. So was Rachel. Those words shattered something inside me. Because she was right. Rachel must have been terrified during her final moments. Pregnant. Alone. Trapped in our basement with an angry man. Oh God. The woman suddenly reached into her coat pocket. Daniel raised the knife immediately. But she only pulled out photographs. Dozens of them. She threw them across the basement floor. Pictures scattered everywhere. Rachel smiling outside a diner. Rachel holding her stomach. Rachel crying inside a car. Rachel kissing another woman on the cheek. Her sister. The woman in front of us. She was 24, the woman whispered. She liked terrible horror movies and cheap tacos and singing badly in the shower. Her voice cracked. She called me every Sunday. I started crying harder. Because suddenly Rachel felt horribly real. Not a corpse. Not evidence. A human being. The woman looked at Daniel again. She thought you loved her. Daniel whispered weakly, I never meant for this. Shut up. Her scream echoed violently through the basement. I jumped so hard I nearly fell. Tears streamed down her face now. You buried my pregnant sister under your damn house. Daniel finally broke. I didn't mean to kill her. Silence. The woman stared at him. Then softly. There it is. Confession. The word hung in the basement like smoke. Daniel realized it too late. I watched panic flood his face instantly. The woman smiled through tears. I recorded that. She lifted her phone slowly. Daniel lunged toward her immediately. Everything happened too fast. She screamed. The phone flew across the floor. Daniel grabbed her arm. She clawed at his face violently. I screamed at both of them to stop. Then, crack. The back of her head slammed against the basement wall. Silence. Complete silence. Daniel froze. The woman slid downward slowly onto the floor. Blood ran from her scalp. My entire body turned numb. No. Daniel dropped beside her immediately. No, 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 no. He shook her shoulders desperately. Wake up, please wake up. Her eyes rolled weakly. Still alive. Barely. I grabbed Daniel's arm violently. We need an ambulance. But the moment those words left my mouth, the woman smiled faintly and whispered something that froze our blood solid. They already know. Sirens. Faint. Distant. But getting closer. Daniel looked at me with pure horror. The woman started laughing weakly through bloody lips. Ha ha ha. Red and blue lights flashed briefly through the tiny basement window. Police. Oh God. The police. Daniel stood up so fast he nearly slipped. His face looked completely destroyed now. What do we do? I stared at him in disbelief. What do we do? After everything. He still asked me that. As if there was still a way out. The woman coughed painfully. Blood stained her teeth. You're finished. Sirens grew louder outside. Closer. Closer. Daniel grabbed my shoulders suddenly. Claire, listen to me. I pulled away instantly. No. We can leave right now. I actually laughed. Not fear this time. Disbelief. Ha ha ha, leave. Yes. Daniel, there's a dead woman under our house. We can run. I stared at him like a stranger. And maybe that's what he had become. Not my husband. Not anymore. Just a desperate, frightened man drowning in his own lies. Then suddenly, the woman on the floor whispered, "He lied to you." Daniel froze instantly. My stomach tightened. What? She looked directly at me now. "He told you Rachel fell." Daniel shouted immediately. "Stop talking." But she kept smiling weakly. She tried to leave him. The basement felt suddenly smaller. Hotter. Daniel backed away slowly. The woman coughed again. Then whispered the words that changed everything. She wasn't the first girl. Silence. I looked at Daniel. His eyes filled with panic. And in that exact moment, I knew. Some horrible instinct inside me knew. There were others. I whispered. Daniel started shaking his head violently. "No, Claire. How many? It wasn't like that. How many?" He looked trapped now. Cornered. Then quietly, like a dying confession. 3. My entire world collapsed. 3. 3 women. 3 secrets. 3 lies. I staggered backward, crying so hard I couldn't see. The woman on the floor started laughing again through blood and tears. "Ha ha ha, you really didn't know." I looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. I had no idea who my husband truly was. The sirens stopped outside the house. Car doors slammed. Voices shouted upstairs. And whispered, "I did love you." Heavy footsteps thundered through the house above us. Police yelling. Doors opening. Chaos. But before anyone reached the basement, Daniel ran. Daniel. My scream tore through the basement as he bolted toward the back storage room. The police were already inside the house upstairs. I could hear them shouting. Heavy boots. Radios crackling. "Police. Anybody downstairs?" The woman on the floor laughed weakly through blood. "Ha ha ha, he's running again." Again. The woman behind us whispered weakly, "Ask him about Emily." Daniel's head snapped toward her instantly. Pure panic. I looked between them. "Who's Emily?" Nobody answered. Police boots thundered above us now. Closer. Closer. Daniel looked cornered. Then finally he whispered, "She disappeared 2 years ago." Ice flooded my veins. Disappeared. The woman coughed painfully. She worked at his factory. I looked at Daniel again. His face had gone completely pale. "She was obsessed with me," he said quickly. "She wouldn't leave me alone." The woman laughed through blood. "Ha ha ha, that's what he always says." Always. Always says. Not once. Not twice. Always. My stomach twisted violently. I realized then that Rachel's sister wasn't just exposing him. She'd been hunting him. For a long time. Daniel reached for me again. "Claire, please." But suddenly I saw him differently. Not my husband. Not the man who danced with me in the kitchen. Not the man who kissed my forehead. I saw something underneath all that. Something selfish. Hungry. Cowardly. A man who destroyed women and cried afterward so people would pity him. A monster wearing kindness like a costume. And somehow, that realization hurt more than the bodies. Police voices exploded upstairs. "We found blood." Daniel flinched. Then he looked at the tunnel again. "His escape." I whispered, "What's down there?" He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "Things you don't want to see." My knees nearly buckled. Before I could speak again, flashlights flooded the basement stairs. Police. Hands where we can see them. Everything happened at once. Daniel panicked instantly. He grabbed the fallen flashlight from the floor and hurled it toward the officers. Glass shattered. The basement lights went out again. Darkness swallowed everything. People screamed. Officers shouted. And somewhere inside that chaos, Daniel ran into the tunnel. I heard his footsteps disappearing underground. Then silence. The lights came back seconds later from police flashlights. The basement looked like a nightmare. Open grave. Blood. Mud. Rachel's sister barely conscious on the floor. And me, standing there covered in dirt and tears. A police officer grabbed my arms immediately. Stay where you are. I didn't resist. I couldn't. My body felt empty. Like my soul had finally detached from me completely. Another officer rushed toward Rachel's sister. She's alive. Paramedics stormed downstairs moments later. Everything blurred after that. Questions. Shouting. Radios. Hands touching my shoulders. At some point they wrapped a blanket around me. I remember staring at Rachel's body while paramedics wheeled her sister upstairs. The tiny bones beside Rachel were finally uncovered fully now. I started sobbing again. One of the officers looked away uncomfortably. Maybe because guilt that raw is ugly to witness. A detective with grey hair knelt beside me eventually. What's your name? Claire. Claire what? Bennett. His expression changed slightly. Recognition. He already knew who I was. Maybe Daniel had talked about me. Maybe the police already suspected something long before tonight. The detective spoke gently. Claire, we need you to tell us everything. Everything. God. Where do you even begin? With the affair. The grave. The tunnel. The lies. I looked toward the hidden passage behind the shelves. Officers were shining lights inside it now. One of them suddenly shouted, "Oh Jesus Christ." The detective stood immediately. What did you find? The officer looked sick. There's another room down here. Cold spread through my entire body. Another room. The detective disappeared into the tunnel with 2 officers. I sat frozen. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. Then finally they returned. And the detective's face looked completely shattered. Like a man who'd just seen hell itself. He looked at me differently now. Not like a suspect. Like a victim. That terrified me more. What's in there? I whispered. He hesitated. Then quietly. Photographs. My stomach tightened. Of what? The detective swallowed hard. Women. Tears filled my eyes immediately. No. Please no. There are boxes too, he continued softly. Jewelry. Phones. IDs. Souvenirs. Daniel kept souvenirs. I felt something inside me finally break completely. Not crack. Break. The detective crouched beside me again. Claire, did you know about any of this? I shook my head so violently my neck hurt. No. I swear to God. And for the first time in weeks. I told the complete truth. The detective studied my face carefully. Then he sighed heavily. We've been investigating missing women connected to your husband's workplace for over a year. I stared at him. What? Rachel's sister contacted us 3 days ago. 3 days. She'd already found him. Already known. The detective looked exhausted. She wore a wire tonight. I remembered the phone. The confession. Oh God. This had been planned. Rachel's sister knowingly walked into a house with a possible serial killer. Just to expose him. Oh God. I whispered, what's her name? The detective blinked. Who? Rachel's sister. He looked surprised for a moment. Then softly. Lena. Lena. I started crying again immediately. Because suddenly she became real too. Not just revenge. Not just rage. A sister. A grieving sister trying to bring her baby sister home. Then suddenly another officer came running downstairs. We found an exit behind the property. The detective turned instantly. Any sign of him? The officer shook his head. No. But there's blood in the tunnel. Blood. Daniel was hurt. For one horrible moment my heart panicked for him automatically. Then I hated myself for still caring. The detective noticed my expression. And quietly he asked, "You still love him, don't you?" I covered my face and sobbed. Because the worst answer in the world was yes. They took me to the police station just before sunrise. I remember the sky looking wrong. Too beautiful for what had happened. Soft orange light stretched across the horizon while Rachel's body was being pulled from beneath my house. Birds sang. Traffic moved. Some woman walked past holding coffee and laughing into her phone. Meanwhile, my entire life had collapsed overnight. The police car smelled like stale cigarettes and rainwater. I sat in the back seat wrapped in a grey blanket staring out the window silently. Every few minutes I'd suddenly remember something and start crying again. Rachel's face. The tiny bones. The hidden room. Daniel saying I love you while running into darkness. God. I felt sick. The station was cold. Bright. Too bright. A female officer led me into a small interview room with white walls and a metal table. There was a camera in the corner. Watching. Always watching. I sat down slowly. My clothes still smelled like basement dirt. The officer gave me water. I couldn't hold the bottle properly because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. After a while, the grey-haired detective entered carrying a folder. He looked exhausted too. Like nobody in that house escaped unchanged. He sat across from me quietly. My name's Detective Harris. I nodded weakly. He opened the folder slowly. Claire, before we continue, I need to ask formally. Do you want a lawyer? Lawyer. That word made reality hit even harder. This wasn't a nightmare anymore. This was criminal. Real. I whispered, am I under arrest? Harris sighed. You helped conceal a body. Tears immediately filled my eyes again. I know. But considering the circumstances and your cooperation, he paused. Right now we're treating you as a material witness. Witness. Not victim. Not innocent. Because innocent women don't help bury bodies. I stared at the table and whispered. I should have called the police. Harris didn't answer. Maybe because there was nothing to say. I finally looked up again. Did Lena survive? His expression softened slightly. She's in surgery. Relief hit me so suddenly I nearly cried harder. Thank God. At least one woman survived him. Harris studied me carefully for a moment. Then he asked quietly, when did you first suspect your husband might be dangerous? Dangerous. Not troubled. Not broken. Dangerous. I thought about it honestly. And the answer made me feel horribly stupid. The basement, I whispered. The night you found Rachel? I nodded. No, before that he was. My voice cracked. He was gentle. Harris leaned back slightly. That's common. I looked at him. He continued carefully. Men like Daniel rarely appear monstrous at first. Men like Daniel. Plural. Like there were many. That thought terrified me. Harris opened the folder again. Inside were photographs. I instantly recognized Rachel. Then another girl. Brunette. Young. Smiling nervously at a camera. Then another. Then another. My stomach twisted violently. How many? Harris hesitated. We've connected 6 disappearances so far. 6. I covered my mouth immediately. Oh God. Possibly more. More. The room suddenly felt too small. Too hot. I remembered Daniel dancing with me in the kitchen while women were disappearing around him. I remembered folding his work shirts. Making him birthday cakes. Sleeping beside him while he hid souvenirs underground. My chest hurt so badly I thought I might stop breathing. Harris slid one photo closer to me. Do you recognize her? I looked down. Blonde hair. Freckles. Sad eyes. And suddenly, I did recognize her. A memory surfaced instantly. A barbecue at Daniel's factory 2 summers ago. She'd been there laughing beside him. I whispered, her name was Kayla. Harris went still immediately. You're sure? Yes. He exchanged a quick glance with another detective behind the glass window. Then Harris wrote something down. You may have just identified our Jane Doe. Jane Doe. A dead girl reduced to a placeholder name. I started crying again. I met her. Harris looked at me carefully. You understand none of this is your fault. I laughed instantly. Sharp. Broken. Ha ha ha. I buried a woman. Silence. Then quietly Harris said, "You buried your husband too." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because he was right. The moment I helped cover Rachel's death, I helped Daniel survive. I protected him. And maybe other women died because of it. That thought nearly destroyed me. I bent forward sobbing into my hands. Oh God, oh God. Harris let me cry for a while. Then finally he asked the question I dreaded most. Did Daniel ever hurt you? I opened my mouth immediately to say no. But then I stopped. Because suddenly memories started rearranging themselves differently in my head. Daniel controlling who I spent time with. Daniel reading my texts as a joke. Daniel getting strangely angry when men spoke to me too long. The way he always apologized afterward. Flowers. Tears. Kisses on my forehead. Oh God. I whispered, I don't know anymore. Harris nodded slowly like he'd heard that answer before. Then he closed the folder. We found something else in the tunnel. Fear tightened inside me immediately. What? He looked grim. A room with women's belongings. I nodded shakily. You told me. There was also a camera. Cold flooded my veins. What kind of camera? His silence answered first. Then softly. Hidden recording equipment. I stared at him blankly. No. Harris looked genuinely sorry now. We believe Daniel recorded some of the women. My stomach lurched violently. And suddenly another horrible thought appeared. What about me? Nobody spoke. That silence was unbearable. Harris, what about me? He looked away briefly. Then finally. We found tapes labeled with your name. I thought I might faint. The room tilted sideways. No. I remembered changing clothes in our bedroom. Showering. Sleeping. Crying. Private moments. All watched. All recorded. I suddenly felt filthy. Violated. I wrapped my arms around myself tightly, trying not to panic. Harris spoke gently now. We'll handle those appropriately. But I barely heard him. Because another memory had surfaced. One I'd ignored for years. A tiny red blinking light near our bedroom smoke detector. I used to joke about it. Ha ha ha, looks like we're being watched. Oh God. We were. We really were. The interview lasted hours after that. Questions. Dates. Names. Stories. Every answer made Daniel feel less human somehow. By noon I was completely exhausted. Emotionally hollow. Harris finally closed his notebook. For now we're placing you in protective custody. I blinked slowly. Protective? We still haven't found Daniel. Fear crawled up my spine instantly. Right. He was still out there. Somewhere. Bleeding. Hiding. Maybe watching. Harris stood up. Then paused near the door. One more thing. I looked up weakly. He hesitated. We found a letter in the tunnel addressed to you. My heartbeat stopped. What? He handed me an evidence bag carefully. Inside was an envelope. My name written in Daniel's handwriting. Claire Bear. My eyes instantly filled with tears. Harris spoke softly. You don't have to read it now. But my shaking fingers were already opening it. Inside was one sentence. Just one. If you knew the truth about your father, you'd understand me. The words didn't make sense at first. I read them again. If you knew the truth about your father, you'd understand me. My hands went completely numb. The letter slipped slightly inside the evidence bag, and I watched it like it belonged to someone else's life. Not mine. Not Claire Bennett's. Harris noticed my face change immediately. What is it? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. I just held up the paper with shaking fingers. His expression shifted as he read it. Slowly. Carefully. Then he leaned back slightly. Did you know what he meant? I shook my head violently. No. No, I don't. My father died when I was 16. My voice cracked on the word died. Cancer. That's what my mother always said. Quiet. Painful. Slow. A good man gone too soon. That's what I believed my entire life. Harris stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood up and walked out of the room without a word. That alone terrified me more than anything else. I sat there alone. White walls. Camera blinking red. My own breathing sounding too loud. And that sentence kept looping in my head. If you knew the truth about your father. Understand me. Understand me. Understand me. I pressed my hands against my head. No, 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 no. The door opened again. But it wasn't Harris. It was a different detective. Younger. More serious. He placed a file on the table. Claire, we need to talk about your father. My stomach dropped instantly. No. He didn't respond right away. Just opened the file slowly. Inside were documents. Old ones. Stamped. Archived. And then photographs. Black and white. A man I recognized immediately. My father. Smiling. Standing in front of a factory building. Daniel's factory. My chest tightened. That's impossible, I whispered. The detective slid another paper forward. Your father worked at the same company as Daniel 15 years ago. I shook my head again. No, he was a construction worker. The detective looked at me carefully. That's what your mother was told to say. Silence. The room tilted slightly. I felt sick. What are you talking about? He exhaled slowly. Your father wasn't just an employee. He paused. Then continued quietly. He was part of an internal investigation. My heart started pounding harder. What investigation? The detective looked down at the file. Then back at me. A series of disappearances from the factory dormitories. My breathing stopped. Dormitories. Women. Factory. Daniel. No. No, no, no. That couldn't connect. It couldn't. The detective turned a page. There was a supervisor involved. Never fully identified. The case went cold after a key witness died suddenly. My mouth went dry. What does this have to do with my father? He hesitated. Then said it. Your father was the witness. My entire body froze. The room became silent. Too silent. Like even the air had stopped moving. I whispered, he was a witness. To what? The detective looked at me for a long time before answering. Human trafficking. The word didn't land at first. It just floated there. Meaningless. Then it hit. Hard. My vision blurred instantly. No. Yes. My hands started shaking uncontrollably again. My father worked in construction, I said weakly. He built houses. He was undercover, the detective interrupted gently. Everything inside me collapsed a little more. Undercover. My father. The man I thought I knew. The man I buried at 16. The detective continued carefully. He was helping us build a case against a network operating through multiple factories. Daniel's workplace was one of the locations. My mouth went dry. No. Daniel wasn't. But even as I said it, I stopped. Because I suddenly remembered something. Daniel always hated talking about his supervisors. He always changed the subject when I asked about promotions. He always avoided introducing me to certain people. And Rachel. Rachel wasn't just some random woman. She worked inside that same system. The detective watched my face carefully. Your father's case went cold after he was killed. My head snapped up. What? They ruled it a construction accident, he said quietly. But evidence suggested otherwise. My hands clenched into fists. Daniel told me Rachel fell. The detective nodded. And? I stared at him. And my father was killed. Silence. A long one. Then the detective said softly. Possibly by the same person. My entire world stopped again. It was too much. Too many layers. Too many buried truths. I stood up so fast the chair scraped behind me. No, this is wrong. This is all wrong. The detective didn't stop me. He just said one thing as I backed toward the wall. Claire, we believe Daniel knew your father. That sentence broke something final inside me. I laughed. Not humor. Not madness. Just pure disbelief trying to survive. Ha ha ha, no. No, he would have told me. But even as I said it, I knew Daniel didn't tell me everything. He never did. Not really. The detective opened one last page. A photo. A group shot. Factory workers standing together. And there, in the background, was Daniel. Standing behind my father. Watching him. Not smiling. Just watching. My breath stopped completely. The detective spoke softly. This was taken 3 weeks before your father died. I stared at the photo until it blurred. My knees weakened. I sank slowly back into the chair. Because suddenly, everything made a different kind of sense. The tunnel under my house. The hidden room. The recordings. The women. The pattern. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was organized. Controlled. Passed through hands. And Daniel. Daniel wasn't just a man hiding crimes. He was standing inside something much older. Much darker. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Where is he now? The detective hesitated. We're tracking him through hospital alerts. He was injured in the tunnel. I nodded slowly. Some part of me already knew what I had to ask next. Is he the one who killed my father? The detective didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. But then he added quietly. We don't know everything yet. I laughed again softly. Because I did. I finally understood the shape of it. Daniel didn't just fall into darkness. He inherited it. Or was born inside it. And I had been sleeping beside it. The camera in the corner blinked red. Still recording. Always recording. I stared at it and whispered. He's going to come for me, isn't he? The detective didn't deny it. He just said. That's why you're here. Outside the room, alarms suddenly echoed through the station. Shouting. Running. Radios exploding with noise. The detective turned sharply toward the door. What now? An officer burst in breathless. We've got movement, unknown male spotted near the perimeter. My blood turned cold. The detective looked at me immediately. Stay here. But I already knew. Daniel wasn't done yet. And neither was this story. Because everything I thought I buried was only the beginning. The alarm didn't stop. It didn't fade into background noise the way things usually do. It kept screaming through the station like it had found a permanent home in the air. Officers ran past my room. Doors slammed. Radios crackled with overlapping voices. Perimeter breached. Southgate, check Southgate. Suspect unconfirmed. My body went completely still. Because I already knew who it was. I didn't need confirmation. I didn't need evidence. Some part of me had felt him the moment the chaos started. Daniel. The detective moved fast toward the door, speaking into his radio. Lock down all exits. No civilian movement. Then he looked back at me. Stay exactly where you are. I nodded automatically. But my hands were already shaking again. Because stay is easy for people who don't know what it feels like to be hunted. The lights in the hallway flickered once. Then again. A loud crash echoed somewhere deep in the building. A window breaking. Someone shouting. Then suddenly. Silence. That kind of silence that feels worse than noise. I stood up slowly without thinking. My chair scraped behind me. I walked toward the small window in the interview room. It was frosted glass, but I could still see shapes moving outside. Shadows. Flashing lights. A blur of uniforms running across the yard. And then. I saw him. For half a second. Just long enough for my stomach to drop. Daniel stood near the far fence line outside the station. Soaked. Breathing heavily. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. Blood on his forearm. He wasn't running anymore. Just standing there. Watching. Even from a distance I could feel it. That same look. Not rage. Not panic. Something quieter. Controlled. Like he was measuring time instead of reacting to it. A police spotlight snapped toward him. Stop. Hands up. Daniel didn't move immediately. Then slowly. He raised his hands. But he didn't look scared. That was the part that made my chest tighten. He looked resigned. Like he had already decided how this ends. Officers rushed toward him from both sides. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I saw his mouth move. He said something. One of the officers paused. Then immediately shouted into his radio. Do not approach, he's armed. My breath caught. Armed. I pressed my hands against the glass. No, 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 no. My voice sounded distant even to me. Suddenly the detective from earlier rushed back into the room. He saw me at the window and immediately pulled me back. Claire, away from the glass. But I resisted weakly. Let me see. He didn't answer. Just forced me back toward the chair. Outside, everything escalated again. More shouting. More movement. Then, a single gunshot. The sound cut through everything. Even through the walls. Even through my bones. I froze completely. The detective swore under his breath and spoke urgently into his radio. Confirm shot fired. Confirm status. My heart wasn't beating normally anymore. It felt wrong. Too slow. Too heavy. Another officer burst into the room seconds later. Suspect is down, repeat. Suspect is down, down. That word hit my stomach like a stone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My body just shut down. The detective looked at me immediately. Stay here. But I was already moving. I don't know why. I just walked. Past him. Past the hallway. Past officers rushing in the opposite direction. Nobody stopped me fast enough. Or maybe they did and I just didn't feel it. The station doors were wide open now. Cold air rushed inside. Outside, rain had started again. Soft. Steady. Like the world was trying to wash itself clean. I stepped onto the pavement barefoot because I didn't even realize I wasn't wearing proper shoes anymore. My feet hit cold, wet ground. And I saw him. Daniel. On the grass near the fence. Surrounded by officers. One kneeling beside him. Hands pressing against his chest. Blood spreading slowly through his shirt. Red in the rain. So familiar it made my stomach turn. I walked forward without thinking. Someone shouted, "Stop." But I didn't stop. Everything sounded underwater now. Like I was inside a different reality. I reached the edge of the crowd. A medic looked up at me, shocked. You can't." But then he saw my face. And stepped aside. Because sometimes grief gets more authority than rules. I knelt down beside Daniel. Rain soaked my hair instantly. His eyes were half open. Breathing shallow. His gaze found me immediately. Even like this. Even now. "Claire," he whispered. My throat closed instantly. "Don't talk," I said quickly. Just stay with me, okay?" His lips twitched slightly. Almost a smile. "Ha ha ha," he breathed weakly. Even now. Even bleeding out in the rain. He still did that broken laugh. I grabbed his hand. It was cold. Too cold. "No," I whispered. "No, Daniel, no, don't do this." His eyes flickered. Not fear. Not regret. Something softer. Tired. "I didn't want you in it," he whispered. My tears mixed with rain instantly. "You put me in it," I choked out. He blinked slowly. "I tried to protect you." "From what?" I snapped. "From the truth." Silence. His breathing got heavier. A medic pushed me gently aside, trying to work. But Daniel squeezed my hand suddenly. Strongly. One last bit of strength. "Your father," he whispered. My whole body went rigid. "Don't," I begged. But he continued anyway. "Your father wasn't clean either." My mind broke a little at that. "No. He knew things." Daniel coughed. "He chose wrong sides." I shook my head violently. "Stop." His grip loosened slightly. Rain poured harder now. Officers stood around us watching in silence. The chaos had paused for this moment. For this ending. Daniel's eyes stayed locked on mine. "Claire," he whispered. I leaned closer. His voice dropped almost to nothing. "I loved you the only way I knew how." My sob broke out immediately. Ugly. Raw. Everything at once. "Ha ha ha," he whispered again faintly. But this time it wasn't the same laugh. It was almost apologetic. Then his hand went slack. The rain kept falling. The medic shouted something. Hands moved. Someone said, "We're losing him." But I already knew. Because the moment his hand slipped from mine, something inside me went completely still. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just empty. I sat there in the rain while they worked around him. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't cry. Not immediately. I just stared at him. Like I was waiting for him to get back up and explain everything again. But he didn't. The detective stood behind me quietly now. He spoke softly. "We're going to need you to come back inside." I didn't move. Because I couldn't stop looking at Daniel's face. The man I married. The man I buried bodies with. The man who loved me. The man who destroyed everything around him. Gone. And yet somehow, it didn't feel finished. Because as I was pulled slowly back toward the station, one thought kept repeating inside my head. If Daniel didn't start this, then who did? The question stayed with me like a bruise. If Daniel didn't start this, then who did? I stood inside the police station again, dripping rainwater onto the tiled floor, watching officers move like shadows behind glass. Everything felt quieter now. Not peaceful. Just hollow. The kind of silence that comes after something breaks beyond repair. They told me Daniel was gone. They used words like time of death and medical confirmation. I heard them, but they didn't land properly. Because part of me still expected him to appear in the doorway and say something soft and broken like he always did at the end of chaos. Claire Bear. Ha ha ha. That nickname hurt more than anything else now. Detective Harris stood beside me again, holding a file that looked heavier than it should have been. "Claire," he said carefully, "we need to finish the statement." I didn't look at him. "What is there left to finish?" He paused. Then opened the file. We found something in Daniel's belongings at the tunnel exit. My stomach tightened. He turned it around so I could see. A map. Not random. Not rough. Organized. Marked. Names written in different handwriting styles. Routes between factories. Dormitories. Houses. And at the top corner, a symbol. A small circle with intersecting lines. Harris watched me closely. "We believe this wasn't just one man." My mouth went dry. "No." He nodded slowly. "There was a system." The word hit harder than a gunshot. System. Not accident. Not obsession. Not chaos. Structure. I sank into the chair behind me. "No," I whispered again. Daniel said he was alone. Harris shook his head. That's what he believed. I looked up at him sharply. Believed. He hesitated. Then said it gently. Or was told. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Something far worse than fear. Understanding. Harris placed another photograph on the table. A man. Older. Well-dressed. Standing at the factory entrance. Behind him, supervisors. Workers. And in the corner of the frame, my father. I stopped breathing. "No," I whispered. Harris continued quietly. "Your father wasn't just investigating the factory." He paused. He was trying to dismantle it from inside. My hands trembled again. "And Daniel?" Harris looked down. "We believe Daniel was recruited after your father's death." Silence. Everything inside me slowed. Recruited. Not random. Not emotional collapse. Not accident. A path. A line that had been drawn long before I ever met him. I whispered, "So what was Rachel?" Harris's expression changed slightly. Collateral damage. My stomach turned violently. And the others? He didn't answer immediately. Then softly. Witnesses who got too close. My breathing broke. I finally understood. Rachel hadn't been the beginning. She had been a mistake in a long chain of controlled violence. And I had walked into the middle of something already rotting. Harris leaned forward slightly. There's something else. I didn't want to hear it. But I nodded anyway. He slid one final file toward me. Inside was a transcript. An old recording summary. My father's name at the top. My throat tightened. I read the first line. If anything happens to me, check the men who inherit the factory operations. They will continue it. My hands went numb. Harris spoke quietly. Your father didn't die in an accident, Claire. I already knew the answer before he said it. He was silenced. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the table edge. And Daniel? I whispered. Harris looked at me carefully. We believe Daniel was meant to replace your father's position in the chain. My breath caught. But he broke. Silence. Then he added. And when he broke, things got messy. I laughed once. It sounded distant. Not mine. Ha ha ha, messy? Tears finally started again, slower now. Not panic. Just grief finally catching up. I looked at the table. At the photos. At the evidence of a life I had been standing next to without ever seeing. And I whispered. So I was never safe. Harris didn't deny it. That was the cruelest confirmation. Outside, rain still fell. Soft now. Like the world was pretending to be calm again. Hours passed. Maybe more. At some point they gave me water. At some point someone asked if I wanted to call family. I didn't answer. Because I had no family left that made sense. My father was dead. My husband was dead. And everything I believed about both of them had turned into something else entirely. Before they let me leave the station, Harris walked me to the door. He spoke softly. Claire, you didn't cause this. I stopped. For the first time, I actually looked at him. My voice came out tired. I helped bury a woman in my basement. Harris nodded slowly. Yes. Silence. Then he added. And then you stopped. That didn't feel like forgiveness. But it felt like something close enough to breathe again. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The station behind me buzzed with unfinished investigations, sealed rooms, and names that would never fully be known. I stepped down onto the wet pavement alone. No Daniel. No sirens. No shouting. Just rain. I walked for a long time without direction. Until I reached a small bridge over dark water. And there I finally stopped. I looked down at my reflection. A 35-year-old woman. Tired eyes. Shaking hands. Someone who once thought her life was ordinary. Ha ha ha. Ordinary. That word felt like a joke now. I whispered into the rain. I didn't know. And for the first time, I wasn't asking for permission to be believed. I was just saying it. The wind moved softly across the water. Somewhere behind me, life continued like it always does. But for me, something had ended completely. Not just Daniel. Not just the basement. But the version of me who believed ignorance was safety. I turned away from the river. And walked forward. Not healed. Not forgiven. Just, still here. And in the distance of my memory, fading like a dream I couldn't fully wake from. I heard his voice one last time. Claire Bear. But this time, I didn't turn around.